crazy thing is that when we see all of these images, and we've got them here, these look like scenes from a disaster movie, but this is the reality in Australia right now. These skies turning blood red. This picture here was taken in the middle of the day. And actually, Victoria have now declared a state of disaster. So it really is a real-life disaster movie. And in the last 48 hours, we've seen fires burning in every single territory and state in Australia, with central and eastern areas having the worst of them. And it's now that huge evacuation order along that east coast where people are fleeing. Yesterday, 5.9 million hectares of land had been burnt since the fires began. That is 3 times the size as well. So just to explain that in a wildfire sense, the Amazon bushfires that made global news were just, bizarrely, 900,000 hectares. That is nearly 6 times more what Australia have seen. And many people, of course, talking about climate change, really unhappy with the reply from the Australian government to all of this. And these are the global temperature stripes from 1900 all the way to present day, showing the temperature on Earth every year, showing how it's warming. But let's compare that to Australia. Their temperatures have risen rapidly, very, very rapidly, right at the end. And in fact, 2019 was Australia's hottest and driest year they have ever recorded. This is no coincidence. So the impact of the wildfires can be seen from space. The smoke has gone all the way from the coast of Australia, covering the whole of the South Island of New Zealand. That's the equivalent of travelling 900 miles all the way from England to Italy. And because of this, Australia have seen the capital city with the worst air quality in the world. It is worth bearing in mind, people talking about whether this is the new normal, we are going to see hotter weather in Australia, more extreme weather, longer heat waves, and it is going to be drier. These conditions are perfect for the spread of these wildfires. So we've seen about the kangaroos dying, we've seen about the koalas dying, but amazingly and devastatingly, 500 million animals are believed to have died. 500 million animals are believed to have died in these bushfires. And as we've been hearing, conditions are set to worsen, becoming catastrophic as we head into Sunday.
God, Laura, 500 million animals. It is heartbreaking, isn't it?
Terrifying, isn't it? Just the scale of life lost and the risk.
Joining us now is Vanessa Keenan, who's in Albury in New South Wales. She's a local councillor, took shelter in a bunker as a bushfire passed over. Good morning to you, Vanessa. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We've just been hearing from our meteorologist, Laura, the scale of the fires, the devastation. You're there on the ground and you're living through it. How has it been for you and your family and your neighbours?
Yes, good morning, guys. Exhausting and horrific are probably a couple of words that best describe. And it's an event that's still unfolding, and whilst as a family we're all safe, a number of us still have some of our properties under threat, and the next couple of days really are just going to be critical, and it's a wait and see at the moment for us.
So you and your family took shelter in a bunker that you'd built on your property, hadn't you? Just talk us through what happened and why you had to go in there, and then what you found when you eventually emerged.
Sure. My mum and her partner live on a farm which is surrounded by Kosciuszko National Park. It's quite a remote area, and her partner Dave has always been aware of the fire risks. So we spent really much of the last 10 years, probably since the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires, really working on making sure that if a fire were to come and if people were there wasn't any way out. So how could he make it as safe as possible? So and that was put to the test just a couple of days ago on New Year's Eve, and that managed to save our lives. We had 2 fire fronts come through, but the second one was just it's so unbelievably intense. The thunderous roar. It was generating its own storm. The sky was black until it crowned 150 feet or more above the trees, the top of the trees, and we certainly made use of that bunker and as well as the fire sprinkler systems as well that saved us.
And we were looking at pictures of your place and the devastation. It really brings it home. Were you scared?
Yeah. I had confidence in where we were. I was scared that we were going to lose the house there. Luckily, the entire farm has been incinerated, but we saved the house. And I was worried about, and I'm still worried about, a place that I have in Tumbarumba. which is down the road. And but once we went into the cellar part, which is underground, I really felt a lot better, and had my mum there, and knowing that she was okay. So I preferred to be with her than the rest of our family, who for over 24 hours didn't know if we were alive or not.
It's just terrifying to think about over here, Vanessa, but to live through it is remarkable. One of the things Laura just said was that 500 million animals have sadly perished in amongst all these fires. When you emerged from the shelter, didn't you see a lot of animals trying to get into your garden because the sprinkler system was kind of protecting the garden? Yeah,
absolutely. And as I said, we're surrounded by a national park, and it's something that we're used to seeing a whole heap of native wildlife, quite a lot there. But when we came out, there were kangaroos, wallabies, all up against the fence near where we had the sprinklers going, seeking some sort of shelter, cooler temperatures. The ground was damp for them, and wasn't burnt. Unlike more than 95% of the farm, and I also noticed that even in the day or so since, that there's been a huge number of wildlife that's come down that I haven't seen before, birds and things that I've never seen in that area. That obviously that there've been some of the few lucky ones that have escaped. We normally see brown snakes and the like around in that area, but that's something that and we expected to see a lot more. When the fires came through, but it was moving so quickly and so intensely, that we didn't have any come through. So it really is horrific and really tragic at the amount of animals that have been lost in this.
It's horrible, and of course human life has been lost as well. I think we see an image of Jeff Keaton's son receiving a sort of commemorative medal.
For bravery, yeah. He's only 19 months old.
He's only 19 months old, and he's there receiving that because his father lost his life in this.
I mean, Vanessa, I wonder, you've never experienced anything like this. You've lived through fires in the past, but where will this leave when hopefully it all comes down and the rains come and the fires go? Where will this leave Australia at? And certainly with their outlook on global warming, are you getting the sense now that this is a big shift for the whole sort of collective of the nation and their conscience?
Absolutely, and it's something that's been happening for the last few months. A couple of months ago, we saw rainforests in Queensland going up in flames, places that had never ever burnt before. As I said, we've been preparing for this kind of thing down here. Well, not to this intensity, but for bushfires down here. Up there, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the fire trails. They don't. It's never been something that was within the realms of possibility. So, the community is really crying out now, and we're really desperate for action from our government to recognise that this is impacting on us. It's no longer a case of Pacific atolls that are flooding and icebergs and glaciers melting. This is impacting on us. This is impacting on our communities here, and we really need to do something.
And what do you make of your government's official response? Scott Morrison has come in for a lot of criticism in terms of his reaction as to whether this is related to global warming and environmental issues. You're in local government, I know, but what's your view?
I think, quite often in times of crisis and emergencies, you see people's true character come through. And I think we are seeing that with our Prime Minister. It's really disappointing that there is a vacuum in leadership. There's a vacuum in even acknowledging that this is an issue that's impacting on our communities, and there's been a refusal to even talk about that. So when you can't even acknowledge that this is a problem, then we're in serious trouble here. That if we've got a government that can't do that.
Speaking to a firefighter yesterday, I'm sure you're talking to many as well, his view was that really the only answer was for rain to come, and with that not on the immediate forecast, you were rather in the lap of the gods other than just trying to tackle it. And we're hearing now of this mega fire, of the two fires joining together. It sounds like a terrifying few days, weeks ahead.
It is absolutely, and if you see where those two fires are going to be joining, it's very close to the farm where we were. So the house there is not out of danger. Ember attacks are happening up to 10 or 15 kilometres in front of the fire front. That you don't even have to see the main fire to lose your house. So this is really terrifying for so many people, and we've got a couple of really long days ahead. We haven't stopped since we're exhausted, and it certainly isn't over yet. And tomorrow is really going to be that test.
I just want to go over to our meteorologist, Laura, who's obviously across all of this. Vanessa, just stay there for a moment, if you will, because I know that you have concerns with Australia's commitment to their climate change and what they're going to try and do to improve things.
It may surprise people that actually Australia are really not committed globally to committing to reducing their carbon footprint. We talked a few years ago about reducing it to 2 degrees to try and lower the carbon levels, but then the recent report said 1.5 degrees will help to stop this tipping point. And in the recent meeting in Madrid, COP25, Australia said, we won't commit to the 1.5 degrees. In fact, we're going to struggle to even reach 2 degrees. And they're trying to find illegal loopholes of buying carbon levels from other countries who are going to make it. So they really, really are contributing massively to the carbon levels. And also, Australia per person have the second highest amount of carbon produced in the world behind Saudi Arabia. So they're worse than China and they're worse than America.
Let's go back to you, Vanessa, because, of course, I think you could hear Laura there, but talking about the fact that it really feels like Australia, certainly at that COP24 in Madrid, were dragging their feet on the idea of reducing temperatures. They're not going to get down to 1.5 degrees. They're not even going to probably hit 2 degrees. I sort of touched on it earlier. Do you think that what you're living through at the moment is going to have an impact on the position of the country and the position of the government?
Gosh, I hope so. If it doesn't, what will? This is something that, the arguments that come back are that, we're just such a tiny population comparatively to the rest of the world, so our emissions are really quite negligible. But really, we're one of the largest exports of coal and through to a country such as China. And it is a huge part of our economy. But let's start the transition. Let's talk about that transition.